get caught in a snowstorm, the chances of survival depend on the weather very much. For the first 18 minutes, it's more or less acceptable. In an avalanche, you have 90% chances of survival. The following 15 minutes, you have more of a chance to asphyxiate, and after 30 minutes, you have only 30% chances of surviving. If you have the luck to be in an air pocket, then you will probably freeze to death instead. This means that within the space of 18 minutes, once someone is caught in an avalanche, you need for the team to get organized, to assess the situation, to find the colleague who has been buried in the snow and to get him out. And then, if necessary, help will come and will send the person to the hospital. My name is Renaud Bigou. I come from Trend Micro, and today we are going to talk about what we can learn from mountaineering in the situation of accident response. We're going to start with a bit of history of mountaineering. The first notable fact is the ascension of the Mont Blanc in 1786. Then we started climbing all the Alps. There was one mythical summit, which is the Cervin, which was climbed on the 14th of July, 1865. This was an essential element, but the Alpine summit that was still not climbed and that a lot of people said would be impossible to climb was the Meige in the Oise. However, 12 later, Pierre Gaspard and his colleague on June 16th of 1787 managed to climb it. So you could have considered that all normal pathways in the Alps had been climbed. So we started with the three northern slopes, so the Cervin, the Eiger, and so on and so forth, and that will finally be conquered in 1936 with after a couple of deaths. So then the war happened. We started with the 8,000, Annapurna, and then the Everest, and then we continued on and on, harder and harder, higher and higher, and this year for the first time K2 managed to be climbed in winter by a Nepalese team. So with about 250 years worth of experience, complicated situations, dangerous situations where time mattered, we managed to do it nonetheless, and this is a great inspiration for us. Let's start with a preamble. We spoke of mountaineering, we spoke of alpine summits, mountain summits. This is the Trois Monts path to the Mont Blanc. So you have the Mont Blanc in the background, and in the middle, the Cursed Mount is a Mount Cursed, basically. So this is a classic element. You start with the first one, then you go to the Cursed peak, and then you finish at the Mont Blanc. What's interesting here is this here. This is an avalanche. A couple of tons, about 10 tons of ice, fell right on the path and took a couple of alpinists with. We were speaking of snow. This is a very important pathway to a refuge in the mountains, and it's where you start in the morning. So you go over these rocks here, and then you follow the glacier. So what you can see here are, again, the rests of an avalanche. It's very tiny here, you probably can't see it very well, but this is the footprints of alpinists going to the refuge. This is the Pointe Aimée, near Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne. It's not even 2,600 meters. What's interesting is to see those traces of avalanche. It's a place that a lot of people like to go skiing, for example. And really, rule number one is that there is no safe mountain. A mountain is always dangerous. Well, there is no information system that is not interesting to hackers, sorry, let me do it again, actually. There's no uninteresting IT system. You can never say, oh, look, my IT system, we're so tiny, the data is not interesting to anyone. You have an IT system, you have abilities, you have calculation capacity, you have data, you're automatically interesting, no question about it. So let's continue a little bit with that introduction and the important parts of that comparison. This is the other side of the Brèche de la Meige. Here you have a crevasse. that is formed by the part of the glacier which, because of gravity, the glaciers go down, and some of the glacier stay stuck to the rock. So you end up with a crevasse right here. Here you have a snow bridge. The problem with a snow bridge is that in order to go over the crevasse, you have to go through the snow bridge. That's what mountaineers do. We go over snow bridges in order to pass crevices. This is another path to the Mont Blanc. And at the summits, you have another peak. And this is the death corridor is how we call it. It's very, very steep. It's very complicated, and you have a lot of rocks raining down on you. And even wearing a helmet, it's very, very dangerous. But you have to go through it. So what's the lesson there? The lesson there is that there are risks that cannot be avoided. It is how it is. Whether it be IT, whether it be mountaineering, it is how it is. Once you open an IS, there are going to be risks. You have to be aware of them. You have to be able to assess them. You have to be able to treat them accordingly. Let's get more into detail. Let's go into tooling, for example. The notion of a tool, when you work on incident response, you know that you need a set of tools. Same again when you go mountaineering. And again, it's a double-edged sword. When you go mountaineering, you know that a rope helps you live together, not die together. And there are a lot of traps when you, let's say, you work with an ice pick. You're on a glacier, you'll go over a rock, use your ice pick. You can keep it in your hand to go over the rock, or you can just attach it to your shoulder with a shoulder strap. But if for whatever reason you drop the ice pick, you drop it and it falls on a colleague, you could kill the colleague. And if you walk on a glacier, if you fall, for example, very often you try to put the ice pick in the ice in order to hold on to it. But if you put the ice pick in the wrong direction, basically, you could also injure yourself quite badly, actually. So a tool is always a double-edged sword. With a rope, it's the same. There are some parts of the path where if someone falls, you'll just take the others with you if you're roped in. So that can be very dangerous. There's an avalanche rescue beacon as well that can emit a signal when someone is caught in an avalanche. We'll see it in a second. The colleagues receive the signal from that beacon and will find their colleagues. Sometimes a first avalanche is going to make the snow layer fragile. You go try to get your colleague, but with the fragile snow layer on top, it's going to call your colleagues who are trying to rescue you, for example. So that's also a double-edged sword. You like to use Python for incident response is flexible, and if an attacker takes over your system, they can use Python against you, basically, and you have signals in order to place to use massive commands on all of your server, and that's great. So you can get all telemetry and get information. That's great. But the problem is, again, if you have that installed everywhere, an attacker has a single entry point. It will be able to hack all of your servers. Double-edged sword again. I do not believe that it's necessary for me to talk about paste tools. Again, this is awesome, a fantastic tool if you deploy that on every server. Again, they have a single entry point, and it's jackpot for that. Then PowerShell, you need that, but intruders know how to use it as well. And then finally, binaries, legitimate binaries. We know certities, etc. The problem is that it will be again hijacked by attackers. They will connect. They will use those tools, and we'll have an LOL issue. And you also have probes. For networks, you could have false positives that will be sent to the CM, and that'll be a problem for your scenario as well. It's a very easy, very thorough way of corrupting things. Let's have a look at rule number 3. So we need to have tools, but we also need to secure those tools to make them safe while being still able to use them properly. So if you have a problem and you need to deploy Python, PS tools, whatever it may be, you need to have them handy, ready for quick deployment. You need to be able to use them without the same operations being too easy for hackers. And again, when we speak of tools, unless you're brand new to IT security or to mountaineering, actually, you know that there is no silver bullet. So anybody who sells solutions saying, look, I have the magic bullet, I can do it alone, my solution cancels and replaces 20, 30 years worth of safety or security history, it is not true. And for mountaineering, it is the same. You may have heard of the backpacks that are also airbags. If you're caught in an avalanche, you basically just trigger your backpack and you just float above the avalanche. That's nice, but it's nice if the snow is lightweight. But if it's very heavy snow, it's not going to work. There's the reco chip as well, so that can be put in shoes and so on and so forth, for example, and that will send a beacon to, for example, a helicopter. So if somebody sees an avalanche with a mountaineer in it, they can call for help, and the helicopter will come. The thing is, mostly those chips are used to find corpses, because you need someone to see you and call the helicopter. And if they don't do that, well, you're still stuck. So ARBs, that's also very nice, but it also doesn't work if you're alone. It's the same as being in space, basically, when you're isolated enough. However, if you have an airbag, a reco chip, an ARB, and you're not alone, well, there your survival rate is much, much higher. And this is exactly the same principle. You have to combine different technologies. People love to say a mix of technologies doesn't mean a mix of products. You have to be able to use several technologies in order to help compensate the issues with some of those technologies. So it's very important. Let's say encryption can evade network detection, so you need for the threat to be caught on the targeted system. What else? Well, let's talk about machine learning for a second. Machine learning is very much a source with false positives, so that may saturate the SIEM. But if you have determinists engines, with static filters, reputation, signatures, and so on and so forth, you will get a lot of information upstream, and then all of a sudden machine learning becomes a lot more useful. So you need to combine two technologies there in order to maximize efficacy. Parametric security, we do it, we need it, less and less actually, because it's become much more complex, and we know that it leaves doors open. We know it's the principle, so we leave everything closed apart from that one backdoor. So what we use now is RASP technologies. And those are very close to the application, directly in the app's code, and you will manage to guarantee perimeter security, which is very important still. Then there's phishing. We can do a lot of things, but phishing still happens. It just happens. There's always, you can do your best, but there's always something getting through. One of the most efficient solution is to work on URL sandboxing. So you monitor the URL, you'll go check what it leads to, and so on and so forth. So you can't send everything to a sandbox unless you're extremely rich, which is actually, we're very happy about that because Trend Micro sells it. So don't hesitate to call us if you need it. So we have anti-phishing solutions, and again, with that technology on top of others, it helps. We have polymorph attacks as well with trigger filters. Very often they don't see anything. However, we do have behavioral monitoring. So if you detect unexpected behavior, if those behaviors are very typical of a malicious action, we'll notice. So the filters that were very useful before are useless here, and then we focus more on behavior analysis. You have fileless threats as well, where you have to do runtime analysis while in operation in order to keep track on what's happening and block the process, hoping it's not too late. Then we also have a lot of correlation engines. So based on different scenarios, so if you have this, and that, it's a cyber attack. It's quite easy to overcome. So you could have commands to destabilize the engine. You could have different sources, you have sometimes also timing. If you wait for 5 minutes between each attacks, it goes undetected. But if you use machine learning engines, same as like a support vector, you're going to be able, because it's a very specific engine, it's going to be able to get rid of all the extremes, all the outliers from the model, which makes it possible, for evasion techniques that work really well against static filters. This is not going to be seen. It's going to be removed from the analysis, and you will then be able to detect the attack. Again, we've seen false positives generated by machine learning. It's part of the model. It's unavoidable. But we can see that in some cases it can be turned to our advantage. So you need that combination of technologies. There is another pitfall, which is having too many tools. That's, again, a very important thing. The more tools you have, the longer it takes for you to learn how to use your system. There is turnover in your team, so the more tools you have, the less they are under control, so to speak. The less people know how to use them. And also, the more tools you have, the more different types of data you'll have. So you'd like to integrate them to an SIM. You have a whole set of data, you have a whole set of engines, connectors that you need to acquire, test with the new versions, etc., etc. It's a lot more difficult to maintain. When you work on correlation, you need pivotal data. Well, you'll pivot to build the engine. When you use very different tools coming from different editors, sending in data with a different format, you have less and less ability to pivot. So you use PPCR more and more, which means that the correlation will be less efficient, longer, and the result will not be quite as precise, quite as detailed. And then finally, there are also some unexpected issues. If you have more tools, it's more difficult to secure. If you have one tool that is only accessible via a stick or via everybody's private key, for example, you could have 12 tools with different servers and different technologies. It's going to be much harder to secure, and access can take a lot longer and be a lot more complicated. The more tools you have, the more complicated it is to say, look, I know I cover all of my needs. There are always overlaps, always gaps, and in the end you have a coverage that is a security coverage that is only partial of your needs. Because sometimes you have, again, too many tools that do not work with one another. So another important rule is that you have to know what you're doing. Do not believe editors. And I know what I'm talking about. You need to do your job. You need to know your needs. You need to go look for the tools which work best for your IT, for your IAS, and for your needs. And this is the way to have the right armamentarium to fight any potential intruders. Let's move on to communication. This is quite a fun one, actually. In the case of mountaineering, the idea is that, let's imagine you're a mountaineer, you're in the middle of nowhere, and someone falls in a crevice. You're in the middle of nowhere, as I specified, so you have no 4G, no network, nothing at all. You just have your cell phone, and it doesn't work, so you can't be calling for help. You're alone, you're on your own. Another case, which is even more dramatic, is so you're roped in with a couple of colleagues, you're climbing a summit. When you're roped to one another, someone is always helping the first one. Generally, a rope is 50 meters, and if you're on a peak, very often you lose visibility. You can't hear your colleagues and you can't see them. I was on a mountain once and I could see someone on the other side of the mountain. He fell on a rock, fell the wrong way around, and the colleague had no information whatsoever. They did not know if the colleague was just knocked out, if they should be calling for help, or if the colleague was dead, where the only solution is to cut the rope, basically. So you can see that communication is essential. And it's the same when you speak of information systems. Communication is a key element when it's about incident response. You've seen already that we don't have a lot of time, so you need to get organized and you need to communicate. The principle is you try to set up alternative communication channels. So you have to know that at the moment, communication is very much linked to IT in one way or another. You have your mobile phone, which is synchronized, and it means that potentially all of the communications are already compromised or may be altered or compromised at any point. So you have to go through a third-party communication solution. So what type of communication do you need? What type of data do you need? There's instant messaging that's available. For incident response, you have to be able to communicate information quickly and to do what you need to do. There is also file sharing as a solution if you have more data or it's a whole log and then you don't want to use WhatsApp for that. So for that, you will need to use a communication channel that is non-corporate with non-corporate accounts, of course. So you need to officially use shadow IT, gray IT. It's kind of fun, but it's kind of funny, but it's the only way. When you use your Teams account, which has already been hacked, it's useless. So you need to do something else. You need to do something different and parallel. You need to go non-corporate. Then you also have other needs where, so for example, typically the management wants to organize a video conference. They want emails with reports in them. Now, honestly, this is not my problem. I'm a response manager. I'm not a policy manager. You can even say, look, the IT system is compromised. You cannot communicate. It'll be a holiday for you, and you can just focus on what you actually need to do. Then you have the communication channels between the incident response team, but there is also some communication channels with the systems that are monitored or that'll make it possible for you to react. So you have to set up communication with those systems, and you can't, sadly, it would be a good thing, but you cannot actually monitor all systems constantly with a broadband communication system. It's too much information. But for some key elements, you can do that. And it's very important to do it. If you can't communicate with your key servers, with the AD and so on and so forth, you're blind and deaf and pretty much dead. So you need to have out-of-band communication systems. You need to monitor them often, monitor their availability first of all, but also monitor the integrity of messages sent and received. We used to do that, take a DS, send false information, pretend like everything is going well. So you need to make sure, you need to launch an attack, fake attack obviously, and make sure that you do receive the right message after this attack. You do that regularly and you know that your response system has proper communication capabilities. So comms need to be resilient at any cost. When I tell you go the shadow IT route, it might not be easy, but I can tell you it's pretty much the only solution to be able to communicate with your teams. Finally, there's organization. Let's turn back to that question of an avalanche. When someone is caught in an avalanche, what do you need to do? Those who are not caught in the avalanche will meet up at around 15 meters away from the avalanche in order to avoid a secondary avalanche. So that is point number one. Second thing you do is you name a leader. Very often you work with a guide, but if the guide is buried, you need someone else to be a leader. So you can't have everybody doing their own thing. You need someone to make decisions, someone to send people left or right. It's very important. You need to turn all ARBs of the group to reception mode. So if someone is in reception mode, they will know what's happening. And it's so it's very important for people to know exactly what's happening. And you need to have those reflexes quickly. Again, we have 18 minutes. Then you need to find the first point of contact. Once you have the point of contact, you get out sensors, depth sensors, and you go around trying to find the body and trying to determine how deep they are, because you can't get someone out if they're 10 centimeters buried in the snow or 70 meters deep. So then you hope that the person is still alive, because as I was explaining, you have exactly 18 minutes to find them. So those are the... this is what's happening. Of course, here we're sitting down, we're very calm, we're doing well, so it's easy for us to talk about it. But when you're caught in an avalanche and you're in a panic, it's a lot more complicated. The only person who's kind of at peace is the person that's stuck under the snow, because they can't do anything anyways. So You need to gather the operational team away from the danger zone. What does that mean for IT? It means that you need to have a list of people who will be contacted if there's an incident. That list needs to be ready, and you will need alternative communication means in order to say, okay, guys, we have a problem. Everybody, all hands on deck. So this will make it possible to determine who's available and who's missing as well. So I don't want to give you any spoilers, but you'll never have the whole team, never, ever. And very often it's the main element, the actual guy you need that will not be around. It's how it is. Murphy's Law. And then once you've gathered your team, you need to find a leader. And that's also a very important thing. It's always a state of emergency. You need to go fast. You need to make decisions quick. And you need for everyone to be focused on the tasks at hand. You can't be thinking about something else. This is not comedy. This is very serious. You have one leader. You don't have a debate. You obey. And if you're not happy with how it's happening, we'll talk about it later down the line. So when you choose a leader, you need for that to be the right person with the technical expertise and some degree of experience of such events. You can't be working with a US type manager working like very showy, but not a lot of substance. You need to understand people. You need for someone to be an actual technical specialist with experience, so an experimented tech specialist, but someone who's also good at organizing, with organizing skills and a good stress resistance. It's also nice to have someone who's able to discuss with the top management. It'll help them not get fired later down the line. So once you know who's the leader, you'll do a first assessment. That's very important. If you do not react, you'll have several incidents that will be managed in the same way. Let's say, and that may happen on a mountain, you're not going to react to an avalanche like you would react to a fall in a crevasse or to someone who has been hit by a rock. So you need, first of all, to do a first assessment. Understand what the problem is, where it came from, what was the source of that problem. This is what you need to get. You need to understand, the vulnerability in your services. What is the breach that was exploited? Did somebody receive an email and click on the attachment? Is it an account that was compromised for whatever reason? Which will lead to, different reactions. And this is why communication with monitoring systems, experience, and experienced leaders with experienced teams, that is going to be a great help. So you have maybe a bit more than 18 minutes in IT, but any time you lose is going to play against you later down the line. And also do not improvise. You need to have a set organization. You know how to set it up, and then you go and you do it. It's no longer time to just try things out, which is why the preparation phase is so important. Proper preparation. Why do we talk about it, and what does it mean? Well, first of all, you need to gather the right documents, and I know that is really a pain. We all know it. There is so we're a software editor, we have a couple of developers, and we know in-house the system is that if you don't like documentation, be a developer. So documentation, we know it's a pain, but you still have to do it. And you need to do it, you need to document everything, you need to update everything. So what are we going to document? We're going to determine who's the incident response team. What are their names, their addresses, their key potentially, since we have encrypted tools in encrypted archives somewhere. What's their role? What can they do? There's always one person who's missing, so who can step in for them? Communication channels also. So you can't just have a WhatsApp channel. You need to have everything ready with the right phone numbers, up to date. Again, that is quite important because people leave and come in and they lose their phone. And so you have to keep that up to date. And then, same as what we've seen before, you need to have the main scenarios of what may happen or what may go wrong. So the key steps have to be documented as well. You need to know what tools to use, you need to know all of that. And same for tools as well. When there's an incident, it's too late to say, let me have a look at the handbook and the manual. No, it's too late. So we know that for such and such operation, you need to work with such and such a tool, and you need to have people who know what they do. We're not here to improvise. We're not here to discover things.
And it's really about to do your homework. I do agree with this. The rest, it's like this or that, but this is human. You have to do with it. Sorry for that. And why do you need to train? Well, we're going to put ourselves in a very high-pressure situation. In the mountain, it's about life or death. In the ICT, it's about your work, but it's also high pressure. Anyway, you have to face a very stressing cause, and it is the environment. There's panic. As such, you need to be ready for that. And specifically, it's a hostile environment. You know, mountain, high altitude, it's cold, a lack of oxygen, and you are in a vertical position. And in ICT, it's hostile, and you've got top management just next door, and who wants to understand what's happening. Paramount, it is that you might have one trial only. If you miss it, you take a wrong decision, it's your end. And so time is very short. Operational, it's a difficult, complex operation. One error and you have got reached the end. As a pressure, it's really high pressure. Why practicing? Why? Well, I'd say if you got a control on this, you have been trained for the process, well, the lower stress impact. And that's important to lower that. If you have to deal with someone who fall down a hill, and you have to introduce a specific wire, and you are going to panic, you are going to search for your friend, and you forgot to click the rope, and your friend falls on the other side. Bye-bye. You are a team. Before going to fetch them, you are going to introduce a relay. It's quite some more difficult, but somehow you prepare well, you forget one thing, the whole team falls down the hill. And such an incident happened, and there's blood all over the place. You are not really in a comfortable position, and so an error might be very expensive, different when you are at home. So get practice. And that means that in IT environment, typically you cannot isolate a working post, and there's an illness that will be disseminated. You can't have a cause analysis. And thereafter, the operations depend on the root cause. So you can't generate that. You don't know where to start with. That's the end. Your investigation will lead to a dead end. You won't have the exfiltration channels, hidden channels, and all your data are on the dark web. On the dark web. But that's very expensive. You have got no signal. You are away into your net, not able to analyze your resources. You are part of a network or whatsoever, and you are lost, and you cannot see what account has been compromised. So you can see that you must be in a position to master your tools, because one failure, a wrong decision, might have major damageable consequences. So first of all, it's about to ensure documentation to be available and up to date. The one after the other, you can check that, and you become aware that there is no update. There's always a problem. Secondly, to speed up setup process, first tries will require a couple of hours just to gather the team. You will see it might take 1 hour, your preparation, to have everybody answering. And all of a sudden it's true. After 25 minutes, after a few trainings, the whole team will be available for work. So you really don't miss that. And also, the people need to get used to that, need to be aware there is no lack of democracy, patience, or benevolence. You have to apply this as such. You're not there to discuss the way it has been said. And the 8th rule, it is make it no-brainer. You have to ensure make it no-brainer. No reflection. You apply. You enforce what has been asked for, not there to innovate or to check whether it works. That's the survival rule. And the first, there's no safe mountain, there's no safe mountain, and there's no information system without interest. There are some risks you cannot avoid. That's part of our information system or nature. Tools need to be ready and secure. The tools are very powerful in the hands of a hijacker. Know what you do. The tools don't take the one a editor has sold. Communication of a major importance, resilient. You are not there to improvise. You do your homework and you make it a no-brainer. And as such, you will think, well, about a genius, intuition, and so forth. Well, at one point in time, you will need that. Why? Never forget rule 0. And because of the Murphy's Law. You got everything. You are trained, and there will be an issue. But as you are an expert and you control things, you can use your genius, your intuition, and so forth. If you don't do that, all this before, it's useless. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I didn't take too much time. It's about time for lunch. If you have got any question, you can join me. No sound to the interpreters. I know much better the one of the sea. And there was something specific in the sea. I don't know how it is in the mountain, but the incident, it is the consequence of a series of mistakes. It might be different over there in the mountain, but this is really similar. In the sea, if in the end you die, well, it's because several mistakes have been committed, even to fall into the water. Another question that came up to my mind when you took that example of that guy who was retaining someone on the one side of the mountain, and he was not informed about his mate, his friend, and you have to cut the rope, but then you need a knife. As such, one is considering whether at all time introducing the safety or the security measure, also able to disable that. That's the multi-parameter of factor analysis, to be able to activate and disable security measures. Well, I didn't think about that neither. I'm not sure that solution really be somehow or necessary to disable this security measure. If you cut that rope in a mountain because there's nothing anymore to do, and you are not going to wait for dying by the cold weather. But I don't know in what case the security system might jeopardize your information system. We're talking about authentication, so you're based upon your own accounts. And this is a kind of disabling. You have to choose for an alternative communication way, non-corporate. I don't know, it might be interesting as a reflection, but I didn't see everything which is possible around this. It might be an interesting path. But quite often, an incident is a consequence of different parameters. Might be cold, it's late, and the time has gone, and so forth. So it might be interesting, of course, and it's the same in ICT. So some people get straightforward to the heart of the information system, and there has been a click, and so forth, and so forth. But in the mountain, I'd say we can make that parallel as well, yes. No other question? That's good. And enjoy your lunch. Bye-bye.